Hey, third grade, this is your math video for lesson 7.8. This is going to be a 2-day lesson, so we're going to introduce it today, and then you will have something to work on afterwards, and then we will review it tomorrow. So what we're going to be thinking about is rules for comparing fractions. So we're going to put fractions in a certain order that have the same numerator, the number on top, and then we're going to write a rule for ordering those similar fractions. So kind of like the general rule that you follow whenever you're working with these different types of fractions. So to start, we're going to try something a little bit different. With this one, it is a mental math warm-up using fractions. So what they want you to do is whenever a fraction is a whole number, you clap, okay? So whenever you go through, we're going to start at 0 halves, and then we're going to keep working our way up. And every time you say a fraction that is a whole number, you want to clap. So I have two things on here to help you. A number strip using halves, and then a number strip that is one whole. So you can see how many halves you need for one whole. So every time we fill up a hole, you clap, okay? So let's just try this. And then afterwards, we'll go through and we'll circle the numbers that show whole numbers, okay? Or the fractions that show whole numbers. So 0 halves, 1 half, 2 halves, right? Because 2 halves is equal to 1 whole. All right, let's keep going. 3 halves, 4 halves. You should clap. 4 halves would be 2 wholes. 5 halves, 6 halves. Did you clap? Did you get that one? So 6 halves would be 3 whole numbers, and then 7 halves and 8 halves. Clap. That was a weak one. There we go. 8 halves would be 4 whole numbers. So you can see here, if I would duplicate this, I could go here and then here, a little sloppy here, and then our last one. So that shows there are 4 whole numbers from 0 halves to 8 halves. And what were the ones that we clapped on again? It was 2 halves, 4 halves, 6 halves, and 8 halves. So let's try that again. Let's try them all together. Ready? 0 halves, 1 half, 2 halves, 3 halves, 4 halves, 5 halves, 6 halves, 7 halves, 8 halves. All right, maybe we'll try that again. I hope you had fun doing a little bit of movement with our fractions. All right, so the next part is going to be in your workbooks on page 238. So pause the video while you go grab your workbook for page 238. All right, so on page 238, we are comparing fractions to halves. So it says, Steve is sorting the number sides of his fraction cards into 2 groups, fractions greater than 1 half and fractions less than 1 half. But it says he made a mistake. So here are the fractions greater than 1 half. Here are the fractions less than 1 half. So what you're trying to solve is, what mistake did Steve make? Use your fraction number line poster, fraction strips, fraction circles, or fraction cards to help you. Mark an X on the card that Steve put in the wrong group. Show or explain how you decide. So I want you to take a peek at the fractions greater than 1 half and the fractions less than 1 half. Okay. And then if you go to this, if you look at this, this is the different number lines that have the halves, fourths, eighths, thirds, and sixes on it. And how you can use something like this from your workbook to solve this problem would be going through and looking at these different problems and seeing if they're greater than 1 half or less than 1 half. So let's start with the fractions that are greater than 1 half. So if I look at 3/4 and I go to the fourths and 3/4 is here, we would say that is greater than 1 half. Now let's try 7/8. Eighths are down here, 7/8. If this is 1 half, it is greater than 1 half. 2 halves. Do we even need to look that up? That's 1 whole. So we know that's greater than half. 2/3. So let's go to our thirds. 2/3. If halfway is about here, 2/3 is greater than 1 half. And then let's look at 3/8. Oh, here's where 3/8 is. And here's where 1/2 is. So is 3/8 greater than 1/2? Nope, it's not, but let's double check. So 1/4, is that less than 1/2? Yep, because 1/2 is here, so 1/4 is less than 1/2. 2/8, 2/8, yeah, that's less than 1/2. 0/2, that's less than 1/2. 1/3, is that less than 1/2? Yeah. And 2/6 down here, 2/6. Well, 3/6 would be halfway, so 2/6 would not. So our answer would be 3/8. 3/8 should go. 3/8 should. Oops, sorry, let me try and make it bigger. Should go under fractions less than 1/2. Okay. And then it says explain how you decided. So for this one, we could just say that 3/8 is less than 4/8. So 3/8 is less than 4/8. Okay, so make sure you have that in your workbook under number 1. There's that big blank space there. But what we did, friends, is we just kept going back and we just kept checking to see which one would be greater than 1/2 and which one would be less than 1/2. And you have a number line like this, and you can even draw a line right down where the halfway is, like that. And if the line is to the left, so like going this way where 3/8 is, then it would be less than half. If it's going this way to the right, it's closer to 1. It's going to be greater than 1/2. So anything on this line is equal to 1/2, and then anything over here is less than, anything over here is greater than. Okay, so I'll go back to this one. You can pause here if you need to copy down what I wrote at the bottom. Okay, so when you're ready, you can start the video again. Now, if you look at the bottom part of the workbook page, it says, with a partner, write a rule that Steve can use to check whether a fraction is greater than 1/2 or less than 1/2. So I want you to take a second to think about this. So if you look at all of our examples at the top of the workbook page, how can we say just by looking at a fraction if it's greater than 1/2 or less than 1/2? Remember, a rule is something that applies to everything. Think of like the input-output boxes. The rule that you solved applied to all of the input and all of the output. That's kind of how this is. The rule that you're trying to create would apply to all of the fractions greater than 1/2 and all of the fractions less than 1/2 that we have here. Okay, so think about that problem for number 2. When you're ready and you have an idea, you can play the video again and I'll show you some of the rules that we are going to work with. So there's 3 different ways that we could explain our work for this problem, okay? So the first one is if the numerator, remember the number on top, is greater than half of the denominator, then the fraction is greater than 1/2. So what that means is if I look at the denominator, because it's saying if the numerator is greater than half of the denominator. So half of 8, for let's just say, for example, is 4. If my numerator is greater than 4, then it is greater than 1/2. That's what this first one is saying. The second one says if the denominator is less than double the numerator, then the fraction is greater than 1/2. So if the denominator, the number on the bottom, is less than double the numerator, then the fraction is greater than 1/2. So if the denominator is less than the double the numerator. So if the denominator, 2, is less than double the numerator, so that would be double 2. So that would be 4. So if that is less than 2, then it is greater than 1/2. Okay, that one can be a little confusing. If double the numerator is less than the denominator, then the fraction is less than 1/2. Okay, so for that one, it says if double the numerator is less than the denominator. So let's look at an example. Double the numerator is less than the denominator. So 2/8. If we would double the numerator, that would be 4. So 4/8. Okay, so it's saying if the double the numerator is less than the denominator, then it's less than 1/2. So because we doubled 2 and we got 4, that's less than our denominator, so it would be less than 1/2. Okay? Again, these are kind of tricky because they're using a lot of different vocabularies or vocabulary terms that you may not be 100% familiar with. But all of these are trying to say the same thing. They're all trying to say that when something, is greater than 1/2 or when something is less than 1/2. Okay? So what the purpose of this is, you just want to point out that each rule uses the same pattern between the numerator and the denominator. So the first one is saying if the numerator is greater than half of the denominator. The second one is saying if the denominator is less than double the numerator. If double the numerator is less than the denominator. So you're all using the same type of technique when trying to solve for those. Again, you'll look at more examples for these to help you better understand this type of problem. But right now, you can pick which one makes the most sense to you to use for number 2 on your workbook page. So you can pause the video, pick which one that you think makes the most sense, and then go from there. Personally, I think the first one, so if the numerator is greater than half of the denominator, then the fraction is greater than 1/2. I think that one is the easiest one to memorize because you just look at the numerator and then half of the denominator. So look at the numerator and then look at the denominator. So for this one, the denominator is 4. Is 3 greater than half of 4, which would be 2? So is 3 greater than 2? Yes. And then 2 over 2, we know that equals 1 whole. 7 over 8, we could say 8 with half of that would be 4. So is 7 greater than 4? Now, when you have a problem like 2/3, if you look at 2/3 on the number line, there is not a number that is directly cut in half because of being an odd number. So with that one, it's a little bit trickier, but you just have to think about it split into thirds, okay? All right, so the last part of our video today will be really quick. You are going to be completing a application problem where you are applying what you know about fractions and trying to write your own rule. So after this video, you are going to complete the Google Slides that looks like this. So what you're going to do is you are going to think about these fractions. So there's all of these fractions with the same numerator. And it says write the fractions in order from least to greatest. So you're going to take this and you're going to move these fractions into the order that you think makes sense from the least to the greatest. So the least means, if you're thinking of fraction strips, the least amount of space filled in to the most amount of space filled in. And then you're going to respond, what patterns do you notice? How are these fractions the same or different? So that's going to be the first part. The second part is going to say, think about these fractions. So then again, it's the same thing, but the numerator's 2. You're going to put them in order from least to greatest, and then again, talk about the patterns that you notice. What we'll do when you come back tomorrow is we'll analyze different student responses and talk about what their rules are. But your job is to do these 2 problems first before watching that second day of the video. All right, guys, good job.